around Australia are having strange and unexplainable encounters. Join BFM's Cosmic Girl and Sifu each Friday night at 10 p.m. as they explore the fascinating world of paranormal and tales of strange encounters. Extraterrestrials, ghosts, monsters, myths and magic. BFM 10 p.m. Fridays, the heart and soul of the Bay. Oh, and the spirit along the Redlands coast and beyond.
Well, hello Strange Encounters fans, and welcome to another exciting episode of Strange Encounters on Bay FM 100.3, the heart, soul and spirit on the Bay. How are you, Buzzer?
Oh, very good. Thanks, Cosmic Girl. What are we going to talk about tonight?
Well, tonight we're going to be talking about negative near-death experiences or distressing near-death experiences. But it's really interesting to me how these sort of experiences or any sort of near-death experiences can come about during duress, but people don't actually die. And that seems to be some sort of connection between trauma and the paranormal.
Yeah, I had an experience once when I had a dream about trauma in a hospital, and it must have been probably 12 months at least after I had that dream. I was in a hospital visiting my grandfather with my mother, and I got a memory of that actual scene in the dream, and I said to my mother, there's going to be doctors and nurses running around here like crazy in a minute. And about 5 minutes later, that's exactly what happened. It wasn't for the sake of my grandfather, but it was another patient there, and then we had to move out of the room so that they could attend to this patient. But it was exactly that dream, that scene that I dreamt at least 12 months before. So that was a trauma that I had prior knowledge was going to happen, and actually I saw it play out.
So you're saying around all that stress, somehow you got drawn into, or the paranormal got triggered and drew you into it as well? Or?
Yeah, it must have. I can't explain it, of course, but it was. I was there only because my grandfather was sick, and it was not in the town where I was at. It was sort of like hundreds of kilometres away from where I'd had the dream, so there was no real association with that location.
Yeah.
And once having the dream, I'd forgotten about it, and it didn't come back into my memory when that scene appeared just before the doctors and nurses become very active, and that's why I mentioned it to my mother. This is going to happen, and 5 minutes later it happened.
That's amazing. That reminds me of something that we're going to just touch on briefly tonight too, is shared near-death experiences where someone going through a dying event somehow triggered paranormal experiences that drew the rest of the family into the dying event as well. So I find that pretty amazing that not only do people have paranormal experiences often caused by duress or stress from a situation, but also people around them can be drawn into it as well. That's amazing.
It is. I think we have to realise that the veil between this reality and the paranormal, the other dimensional reality, is so thin that sometimes we can sort of blend a little bit so we get an insight into what's happening in the future. It's an amazing thing to know, but I think you could probably train yourself to be able to have more access into this other dimension and therefore get these prophetic dreams and do all that sort of thing, and possibly able to help people that are going to have stress in the near future as far as near-death experiences or very critical illness. If we could delve into that and have prior knowledge of that happening, we could probably comfort them and give them what they need to be able to get through that stage of life or death in much more comfort. That's a possibility, I think. I think maybe the Egyptians were quite aware of all this situation, and that's why they were so interested in the afterlife.
Well, hi Beth. Welcome to Strange Encounters.
Thank you very much, Sheryl.
It's great to have you here. So today, everyone, I'm here with Beth Darlington from Access Paranormal, and we're talking about negative NDEs or near-death experiences. I guess you'd call them distressing near-death experiences.
That's the common term, yeah.
Yeah, right. So let's just start off in the beginning though. What got you interested in near-death experiences? Have you had an experience yourself, or do you know someone who did?
To be honest, years ago, I've come across it, obviously being involved in the paranormal and paranormal topics. It was probably my least favorite or least wanting to learn topic. I had no drive whatsoever. I thought, oh, that's lovely. Some people feel like they've passed through and they've come back and they're okay. And I met somebody when I started to actually seriously investigate, probably about maybe 8 years ago, who claimed to have had an NDE. And I was able to speak to her about her experiences a lot more, about what she went through. But the intriguing thing about that is I actually started to really doubt that she actually had one, which is quite unusual because often people who've had experiences have a lot of detail. There's a lot more passion about it. And I found this particular person, I guess you could say my expectation was, I thought if you had felt that you had passed over and come back, you would have a lot more compassion, a lot more opening to other people, and a lot more learning, and a lot people almost come back or explain to come back quite differently after having such a profound experience. And I found that this person just almost didn't really seem to care, almost. So I kind of thought that was really quite intriguing. So that sat in the back of my mind for quite a while. But since being here in the UK, there was a talk that I attended where someone was talking about negative NDEs as opposed to all the positive peace, love, and mum beans, I guess you could say. And I thought maybe that person had a negative one but didn't want to tell me about it, or I wanted to learn about why some people have negative ones and not positive ones. Obviously, positive ones are more reported. What constitutes somebody, or is there a certain criteria for somebody that is more likely to have a negative one? Is it really about what we're doing here as opposed to when we pass over? Things like that. So it's only been very gradual to have this particular interest. And like with more paranormal topics, the more you dig, the more there's 10 other questions to the one that you originally had asked. So yeah, it literally has been a very gradual thing, and I think it's the investigator in me that wants to find out more.
Yeah, well, you've actually touched on one of the questions I was going to ask you. Do you think that people have less of these negative or distressing near-death experiences, or are they just underreported? And if it's less, perhaps, what are your thoughts on why that might be?
I think it's down to the culture. I think it's down to the country, and I think it's down to the individual. So it's three different areas that you've got to look at it, because we are very multifaceted. So the person, one hospital study I remember looking at had said that they had looked at the oxygen levels in people's brains when they were clinically dead and had come back. And I think only found about 15% of those people over a certain period of time had claimed to have an NDE. So, okay, that's a particular area. What kind of, as I said, from a cultural perspective, what things were these people seeing and experiencing? Was it something that fitted their culture? Was it something that fitted another culture? No, it actually fitted their own culture. So then there's that aspect as well. Is that unconscious or subconscious, or our beliefs, or is it because of our faith as well? Those kinds of things too. So it's a really, really intriguing situation when it comes to that. I need to look into that a hell of a lot more.
Yes, it's the eternal question, is it? Why does something happen to someone and one person and not to other people?
Yeah, exactly.
It's very intriguing. Now you're soon, which I'm going to participate in, holding an online learning lounge about just negative and near-death experiences, and talking about the different types. So can you run us through that? Some of those?
There's obviously with NDEs, they've got your general, you've got your happy, most reported one, of course. Then, of course, you've got ones where people feel they're in a void. So that it may not be negative or positive, they're just in an obliviation sort of thing. And there's lots of ramifications from that, from people having experienced that as well, whether it's positive or negative. And then, of course, there's the negative side too. And then there's other aspects of as well, where there's ones where people feel like they're in hell, other ones where feel that they are being judged as well. So there's a negative judgmental side to it too. So instead of having your life flash before your eyes in a positive way, it's all the negative things that you've done and that you feel that you need to repent for in whatever way you feel of that. So it's to have that negativity. It's a very, as I said, it's very intriguing to me because not often reported for that sort of stuff. Yeah.
I remember the past president of the International Association of Near-Death Studies, Nancy Evans Bush. She had a negative near-death experiences, and she wrote a couple of books about it. I think one was Dancing Past the Dark, and the other one was the Buddha in Hell and Other Alarms, which really got my attention. So I had to buy that one because it fascinated me, those sort of ideas. And she said, I remember her saying that her experience, it was annihilating to her. It was like, she said, talking about near-death experiences as negative is a bit like talking about childbirth as uncomfortable.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. It's the plain obvious. And like you said, with the reports of NDEs, there's probably a lot more of it going on because a lot of the time people think, like with the paranormal, any type of paranormal experience, possible paranormal experience, I'm going crazy. People are going to think I'm going crazy and nuts here because I've experienced, going through to the other side and coming back. But imagine it from a negative perspective, because there's almost that pressure to say, well, it should be positive. But it wasn't positive. So that does it mean I'm a bad person? Like, am I going to suffer this again? If I was to ever die, am I going to actually stay there in whatever horrible place and experience I had? So, yeah, definitely. There's it is. It's like the childbirth you don't want to talk about. Yeah, it's horrible. Oops. It's like, my bad.
Well,
it is.
That's what happened in the early days, wasn't it? In the research field with NDEs, because that's all you heard about. I know I got very interested very early on, the group was only established in the mid-1970s. That's the International Association of Near-Death Studies. So by the time I got involved, it was 10 years later, and all I ever read about were the positive experiences, the uplifting feeling, I want to go back home, I'm not afraid of death, and all that sort of stuff. And I think that I can imagine that perhaps that and the positive ones, people would lose that fear of death, but in the negative ones, I think it would reinforce it, wouldn't it?
Well, it is, and that's the other part of it as well. With the few encounters that people have had that have been negative NDEs, what happens to those people's lives afterwards? So, as we mentioned, like some may not want to talk about it, some are afraid about it. Some, what kind of life-changing experiences and decisions would you have afterwards if you thought that was what was going to be waiting for you? So it's like you said, it's finding that out and being able to, obviously, from what we know, they, like I said, one study said only 15% of people who have depreciation of oxygen in their brain at a certain level claim to have NDEs. So then how much of that 15% of those people are actually going to talk about it, and how much of that percentage is negative? So,
which is really interesting to me, because coming from the UFO research field myself, during the 90s, we're overwhelmed with people who would report negative close encounter experiences as opposed to the positive. And that fascinates me how that happens. But maybe in each field there's a trend, because in the UFO field, for example, it started out very positive, and these were our space brothers, and then that was in the 50s and 60s, and by the 80s, we're starting to get reports of negative experiences, these alien abductions. So maybe in the near-death experience field, it has its own trends too. Do you think that's possible?
Absolutely could be possible. Absolutely. And I think with our society, the way it is, with social media as well, and then there's a lot more growing openness with people talking about not just NDEs or the paranormal, but in mental illness perspectives. People are starting to feel gradually more comfortable talking about these particular negative experiences, I think that will also have an effect as well. So it may not be a rise in negative NDEs, but it actually may just be more people actually gradually starting to feel more comfortable talking about them.
Yeah.
And also going and seeking help if that's what they want to do as well, and where they feel that they need to go. Because like I said, there could be all sorts of knock-on effects for this kind of thing. There could be survivor's guilt. There could be, I felt isolation and purgatory, so I'm going to now make sure that my life is fulfilled, as opposed to because I don't want to ever have to cross over and feel the isolation of nothingness. So, and again, like to me, it's the cultural influences and why that particular person is somebody else. Oh my gosh, it's just a fascinating subject.
It's huge, isn't it? So what do you think's going on then? Whether it's a negative experience or a positive experience, what's your feelings? What's your paranormal gut telling you about near-death experiences? Is it something from the human mind, or is there something more to it?
I think it's a combination. I think it's a combination of both. Obviously, and it's particularly with negative NDEs, there's a real moral issue with putting people through it. Like it's not like we're going to put you under anesthetic and hopefully you'll cut them out. It's like not even negative NDE, just having an NDE experience. So like I said, it's spontaneous, like with most paranormal phenomena. So it's very, very, very difficult to try and measure in that way. But I honestly think at this point in time, I think it's a combination of both. There's got to be something going on. There's too many people who explain having very similar experiences, but at the same time, I'm intrigued about the cultural aspect of it, where some people in some countries will see druids, like say here in the UK, druids and Celts and ancients come to them and their loved ones. And then if someone's having an NDE experience in Asia, it'll be monks, it'll be, so is it the conscious, or is it because that's what your faith is? Like that in itself is a whole other rabbit warren that is very difficult to try and find an answer to. But it's fascinating to contemplate, at least as people who investigate possible paranormal phenomena. We should take all these bits in people's experiences. But I think at the moment it's a combination of both. There's got to be something going on, because not all of science can explain absolutely all of it, because we haven't explored all of it. You can't, one experience could be 50 different reasons why that experience happened. And those 50 reasons, we may only, right now, in our current understanding, only know 20. So it could be actually all explainable. We just haven't figured it out. But at the same time, we should still keep our minds open to the fact that there could be something else going on, where there is this other side, like, the Akashic records and all this. I probably said that wrong, and I do apologize to the rest of the spiritual community by doing so. But it's really that, there could be all sorts of things going on that would confirm that. But it's not going to happen in my lifetime. But I'm happy to explore it in the meantime.
Yeah. I'm just going to pause there. Can you just check your sound?
Yep.
What are you using? Laptop or phone? Or?
I'm using an H1.
Okay, right. So can you just that your sound is coming through a little bit. I'm not worried about the video, but I know for the maybe just bring a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Is that a bit better?
Show. That might be better. Okay.
Cool.
So let me go back to where I was. Okay. You've touched on something I was going to go into. Right. So on that topic, though, like in the 1960s, people used many different psychedelic drugs, but one of them was DMT, dimethyltryptamine. And some of the recent research, and there's a book, I can't remember who wrote that book, but there was some of the research done on the use of DMT applied externally to people. And DMT is actually created in the human body too. It's the only thing that the brain will let through to itself, which is really interesting. The brain will keep out all the other toxins and things, but it'll let DMT through. So, so I'm wondering, some people say that it creates a gateway to mystical experiences when it's released in the body. And I know it's released through situations like dreams, and childbirth
and near-death experiences. And actually DMT is also released in the body of other mammals too, and even some plants. I didn't even know that till recently. So what's the point of that? Why do humans have this ability for a naturally occurring DMT in the body to be released under certain circumstances? Does it create that gateway to the paranormal, mystical portals that are exist, or what do you think?
I think the body, when it's under stress, particularly when it's about to die, will go into all sorts of different survival modes, and I think that DMT is one of them. Obviously, it's a way to cope with the situation. Whether it's coping because it opens you up, or whether it's coping to shut you down, I don't know. But I think it's obviously, and as I said, it's something that we can speculate. We never really truly know. But I think it's very important to be open about. I think, when your body's under a particular level of stress, particularly at the time of when your vital organs shut down, to the point where you do get to an NDE situation, the chemicals in your brain and your body are so underestimated. Like as I said, like you said, there's hallucinations that can be brought on with that. So, does that explain why someone has an NDE, or does it enhance why someone has an NDE? We don't really know. Is it, like you said, is it the gateway to someone having an experience and being able to, it's oh my gosh, I could talk for hours about this. So I think chemicals in the body in that particular situation, I think, could either open and or enhance. We don't know. But I think, as I said, like where's the moral testing come from? We're going, okay, so take some of this and let me know how you go. It's like there's only so far you can go with actually trying to find the actual research on that, unless it's actually, like again with paranormal experiences, it's taking the information from those who've actually experienced it in those honest situations, which is often in hospital in those kinds of cases.
And people have done studies on near experiences on cardiac arrest patients too, and they're very interesting. I haven't actually looked into the different situations under which NDEs occur and the resulting effects afterwards. Have you, in different situations?
There's been a couple of studies, only about 3 that I've read, that people have how they felt afterwards, more like the after effects. So it's how it's affected their lives. With like I said, with negative NDEs, it's a really 50-50. Some people will talk about it, some people won't. Some people really take the positive out of a negative NDE. Some people literally just there's almost like, they call it a rational NDE. So some people just like rationalize it. Oh, it's whatever. It was just one of those things, and I'm okay. I'm fine now, and kind of close the door and keep it hidden to themselves as well. So I think again, it's a very individualistic situation where how people deal with it afterwards. I think from what I did for my initial research, that there are support groups of people who have had NDE experiences, because it's almost like trying to reintegrate into society. It's almost, I know that feels like moving from Australia to London. Like there's support groups here too. It's often is about a pub, but obviously I digress. On a serious note, there are support groups of people who have had these situations and experienced this, whether it's real or not. They've experienced something that's intense. And it's life-changing stuff. So there are groups out there that help people deal with this thing, which I think it's good. I know a lot of people in the skeptics community will probably think it's not good, but to have someone to talk to about your experience, I think, regardless of whether it's real or not, needs to happen. Whether there is science to back it up, because like it's not like I bumped my elbow stuff, you know what I mean? Like, this is kind of intense. You've felt, you have physically died, and you come back and you have seen and experienced something that stays with you. Who remembers their dreams? Half the time I don't. I get fractions of them. I think it's some weird sort of modern art movie half the time. But these people who have experienced NDEs have detail in their memories of what they've seen, and the people and experiences. This is stuff that needs to be explored, and if anything, respected as well.
You covered a lot there, and I'm trying.
Sorry.
No, that's okay, because it's a huge subject, and it can't help but stir up so many, philosophical questions and ethical questions, and the big questions, basically, the God questions, really, and the afterlife and what it means to be human, and when do we really come into existence, and when do we ever stop existing, even if we're not in the physical body, all those questions. So it's a huge, huge subject. Yeah. But I was reading recently about there was a practice in Egypt, and I think this is in the pyramid text, where the pharaohs were, with the help of the temple priests, were actually put into a situation to induce a near-death experience, because it was believed that they couldn't become spiritually enlightened unless they could go to the other side, or where the Undrot is and all that sort of thing. So they used to put them in a big box and which was just the right size, and it had just enough air so that it would run out, and that would induce a near-death experience. Goodness knows how many pharaohs didn't make it. But have you read about that in different cultures, other cultures, where inducing those situations is used for spiritual initiation, say?
Yeah, of course, shamanic, all sorts of different cultures. They have their own version and saying of and knowledge of what NDEs are. I mean, shamanic traditions are, when they go into such a deep meditation, they go into the underworld. So it's like our meditation on steroids, and like you said, to the point where it's almost borderline coming back. But what they do is they would often do that for people they feel are demonically possessed. So what they do is they find the soul of the person that has soul is gone and it's been possessed by a negative entity, and they go find that soul and bring it back to that person, so that negative entity goes out, and that's their thing. But it's literally, from what I've read, it's almost like the condition they put themselves is borderline. To the point where they're in between two worlds. And that's what often people would obviously see as NDEs, is whether it's good or bad, who are in between two worlds. So they would actually go and hunt and find and bring that back. But absolutely, and again, like I mentioned before, the different types of thoughts and cultures of when people do have NDEs, what they see is it influenced by their life here now, or is it influenced because of, that's what's there on the other side, does energy present itself to you in the way that feels comfortable regardless, so you're not going to feel frightened or scared generally. And then the times when you do feel frightened or scared, of those very rare times, then why is that the case?
Interesting, very interesting. So I watched a documentary by Freddie Silver, and it was called Otherworld, Places of Initiation and Living Resurrection. And in that, he says that when ancient people had NDEs, they were considered a resurrection experience, not of physical resurrection like Lazarus in the Bible, but that spiritual resurrection. And I guess that goes on to speak to some of the after effects of these experiences. Just switching a bit for the moment from, actually even including negative near-death experiences. But some people, their lives have changed dramatically, and they become, I know with the positive types of experiences, people become quite spiritually engaged. With the negative experiences, do you think they become spiritually disengaged?
There is definitely potential for that, absolutely. It's because a lot of people don't talk about negative NDEs, it's more difficult to get that information.
Yeah.
Why me? Why was I the one that had the horrible experience of, and people talk of demonic entities, even if they're not of religious faith. They talk about, as I said, it was a negative run of life, like these, all the things you did wrong, screaming, animals being hurt, all the horrible, horrible things. It's like, why am I seeing this if, I've done nothing wrong? I think the ramifications can be very, like I said, very individualistic in that way. Very much so.
Yeah, and you're right. We don't know, because I think there's a lot of people don't talk about those experiences. And I guess they probably, to try and understand the negative type of experiences, they might turn to the church, they might turn to religion, and we would never hear from them, would we?
Absolutely, absolutely. And then again, like you said, that could be a spiritual awakening for them in that way. It's like, well, oh, I need to turn to God, or I need to turn to whatever faith that they feel that is going to help them to salvage themselves from that. Yeah, it's very intriguing to find out what's going to happen to someone who's had a negative NDE, because, like I said, most of the time we're more than likely not going to know. Like I said, some people can take it in a positive way. I'm still here, and I have a chance to make a difference, and I can change this. There could also be that as well, and also obviously, as we've spoken about, some people are like, well, I'm who's to know that someone's had a negative NDE and actually gone off the rails, in socially speaking, and just gone, well, it's going to be not great anyway, so I'm just going to go and if it's going to get bad, make it bad. So who knows? And like I've mentioned so many times, like, why is it these types of people in these situations that have this negativeness, if they're not, like, what determines that particular thing? It's just fascinating.
Yeah. Dr. Raymond Moody, he had, I'm just switching, start again. Just switching gears here, Dr. Raymond Moody had wrote a book called Glimpses of Eternity, I think it is, about shared near-death experiences, which I find absolutely amazing. So, and I think it was where what got him started on it was where he was in a situation where a family member was dying, and in the room, I think he talked from memory, I can't remember now, but talked about energy starting to shimmer, and the whoever he was with, I think it was one of his parents was dying, I think, and I think he had a sibling or two with him, or maybe a sibling and the other parent, and they're all drawn into the dying experience of this parent. And please excuse me, anyone who's read the book, I might have some of those facts wrong, but but the whole thing is about these shared death experiences, or near-death experience, or death experiences, how the living can be drawn into them as well. So that sort of puts the kibosh on the whole idea of this is just a manifestation of the dying human brain. So have you heard of those? And what do you think about that?
Oh, I would love to be able to find ways to be able to replicate and explore more with that. Like, that is fascinating. I've not heard of shared NDEs previously, but again, like, that would be fascinating. It's, having multiple people do that. I mean, do people like have a multiple? Oh gosh, the name escapes me, and I hate it. Remote viewing. So, multiple remote, do people, when they remote view, move past their bodies, and do they cross over, go, oh, sorry, mate, I'm just flying over, I've got to go this side, and I'm not joking, I'm not doing it from a comical perspective. Does that happen from an NDE perspective, where it's like, and why those people at that particular time have that ability to be able to go and have that experience as well? Like, is it because there's a connection of family? Is it because connection of family is much more stronger than what we give it credit for? Oh my gosh, that sounds so awesome. I've not heard of shared NDEs. Now you've done it, Sheryl. You've ruined me for life.
Well, yeah, that's the question, isn't it? Again, why some people can do this. And I'm wondering, like in our history, we have this history of early religions as being stemming from shamanic practices. Shamanism is thought to be the oldest religion in the world. So, and shamans who are, or people who their tribe call shamans anyway, who have these paranormal abilities from birth, or they have experiences with, trigger the paranormal abilities or the psychic abilities, whatever you want to call it. And in particular, if they're struck by lightning and survive, they're thought to be very, very powerful shamans. And that reminds me of Daniel Brinkley's story. He was struck by lightning and had a near-death experience. Actually went on to have another 2, I think, and he developed these abilities too. So I'm guessing, I'm going to ask you the question, do you think that, shamans are always born for their times. maybe people that we're hearing about stories of near-death experiences and other paranormal experiences today, maybe they're the Western shamans, but we don't have the culture to train those people, you know, but through them telling their stories, we're still learning.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it. I think that's a very interesting point to see, that the people that experience NDEs, obviously we said, no, why is it them? But if it's them, instead of just why is it them, if it's them, what makes them special, like you say? Is it because, you know, to me, is maybe there could be a particular, dare I say, how I say, a caveman gift. It sounds really like blasé, but in the sense of there's a primal instinct that they still have that most of us don't, and has been bred out. Maybe they have this openness that they can actually go through and come back, that has been there long before. You know, this is all speculation, but let's put it out there. You know, maybe they've got something that is quite ancient that the rest of us have been bred out. And so they've got this opportunity to be able to have this ability to do that, like I said, from a shaman perspective, to go to another level that other of us don't. I would love to know how to consistently meditate. My mind does not shut down quick enough and or for long enough. I'm too busy planning my shopping, my writing, all sorts of like this, you know. But that's earthly stuff, you know. That's that kind of thing. But for these guys, these people that go through this, you know, maybe there's something with, like you say, within built them that says, you know, I've had this long before. I was born with this, the ability to be able to cross over and come back, and then having an NDE maybe accentuates that. Maybe there's a typical, you know, maybe you don't have to have an NDE to have this ability, or you know what I mean, like it kind of branches out. Like if they maybe NDE show people that they can act, there is, like, obviously, you know, there is another side to it. Oh my goodness, yeah, it's yeah, there's so much to this topic. I'm trying to talk for hours. I'm trying not to.
So are there any particular negative near-death experiences that you've read about that have sort of stayed in your mind?
There was one particular case, and of course right now don't remember the name, and there's this guy that felt he'd crossed over, and literally had woken up and was burning, because all I could feel is that I was burning. And then I looked up, and there was this like I say ugly looking thing, but it was a very negative, ugly looking thing. He was obviously clearly frightened at the time when it was happening, and quite shaken by it as well. Turned around and said, like, you know, well, what am I doing here? Because I was so confused. Like, you know, I've gone from blankness to this. So it was the shock. And then whatever it was, it goes, it didn't even have to say anything. It just was a feeling. He goes, I needed to get out. When I tried to get out, I couldn't get out of the room. And I'm banging on the doors and the walls. I couldn't get out of the room. And it just stood there, because it didn't come near me, but it just stood there. And I felt like this is my life. This is what I'm going to be trying to get out of this room, from something that hasn't come towards me to harm me yet, but it will in time. So I'm literally running out of time constantly. And that, I found that really intense, because it's like, what did you do in our human plane of thinking and spiritual movement? Did you think to deserve something like that? I would love to sit down and go, so why do you think you were the person to have experienced that, as opposed to somebody who said, I saw grandma and granddad, you know, like he called on in his faith, he said, I called on God, nobody came, and he lost his faith after that.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that can also happen as well. A lot of people will lose their faith in whatever higher power, whether regardless it's Jesus or God or anyone else, they will lose their higher faith, because they're like, I'm going through this and I've followed, and this shouldn't be happening, and I've called upon you and you weren't there to rescue me. Mm-hmm. And then of course there's you know, people say there's the risk of those people falling out in society, or maybe they just go to another faith. That's not always so bad, but it depends on the person and their personal circumstances of which path they take.
Yeah. Yeah, I could only imagine the destitution. Is that a real word?
Yeah,
I could
yeah,
only
it is. Yeah,
I could
yeah.
only imagine the depths that someone would, go down into in that situation, particularly if they had some sort of spiritual faith. And let's face it, really, when we're talking about the afterlife, reincarnation, near-death experiences as possible evidence for those things, mediums saying, passing on messages to the living from their dead relatives, and there's a lot of things that there's strong suggestive evidence that there's something else going on past their physical existence, but it's not definitive, is it?
No. And that's the hardest part. You're dealing with people's experiences. It is the hardest thing in the world to try and validate, because you're dealing with people's interpretations of their experiences, with their filters, with their cultures, with their lives, with their countries. It's so difficult, but at the same time, it cannot be ignored. Definitely cannot be ignored. And like even with paranormal investigating, which is usually my area of expertise, like taking witness statements, I'm not going to ignore them. This is what someone's experienced. Whether I would have seen it the same way or not, it doesn't matter. Whether I would have been in that situation, had the same situation happen to me, is different. It's either way, it needs to be counted. It can't be the big count, but it has to be counted. And with NDEs, it's such a personal experience. These people have believed and felt and known and seen what it could be like on the other side. All we respectively say is on the other side, and it's been happening for years too, and different ways all around the world. So something's going on. We need to look at it. And people are obviously researching as much as they can, gathering data and things like that. But yeah, it's another paranormal topic. I'm surprisingly enthralled by.
Yeah. So, well, I've had a distressing near-death experience, and I've had a significant out-of-body experience. So that's my interest in this. So I know that from personal experience, that we can exist outside the physical, our consciousness can exist outside the physical body. And particularly in my out-of-body experience, I could see everything as plainly as in ordinary reality, which was very strange to me. It wasn't fuzzy and looked like looking through water or anything like that. It was completely the same. So, I know that can happen, but what does that actually mean in relation to continuing your existence after you die? I mean, yeah. How do we get that? How do we even go from where we are to get better evidence, or to get some evidence, not better evidence, just some hard evidence, to be able to support that thinking?
I don't think in our lifetime it's going to happen, personally. I think there needs to be elements of science that needs to help explain other parts of science that could help explain this. It may not be direct, but I think there is potential for that. I think that's what we need to be open to. That's probably, for me, the only way that this will help explain it. So there'll be something of science when it comes to physics, when it comes to neuroscience, or however it is. They'll find something, and then somebody in some way will look and go, that could actually be linked to NDEs, that could help explain it. And not explain it in the sense of, oh, well, it's not of something spiritual. It could actually probably help make it something that's possibly spiritual as well, or explain why it is, explain why it's so very individual as well. It's a very individual and personal experience for someone who's never been through it. So I think in some way that may be the only way that will happen, but like I said, I don't think it's going to happen in our lifetime. But as investigators, we're just going to love looking for it anyway.
The great mystery.
Yep, great mystery.
Oh dear. So some people think of ordinary reality as God's dream generating machine. I guess you can see, I'm sure you've heard of that idea that, you know, we're the dream. You know, this is what happens when people have near-death experiences, that what they experience while they're having the experience, for them, is much more real than what they've got, what's here and now.
Yeah.
So what do you think? Is that a possibility in your thinking, that somehow this reality is being created, you know, by something external to us, and looking on, you know, like a reality TV show or something?
It could very well be. I mean, it explains string theory, multiverse, like literally they're theories, but they're theories because they're theories for a reason. You know, they definitely could be that. There could be all different facets of that as well, you know, like there could be another life of me not being here. It could be life of me still living in Australia. Like it's, you know, we have to be open to the possibility. That's the biggest thing out of any of this kind of stuff, is that when you're dealing with paranormal topics, particularly like NDEs, negative or positive, you've got to be open to it, because we just don't know. Our brains are so complex. People go, oh, we only use 10% of our brains. That's no way, because if we use 10% of our brains, we wouldn't be able to get up from our chair. So technically we use all our brains. There's only parts of our brains that have not been explored, so that's actually a fallacy. So we actually use all of our brains all of the time. We don't use 10% of it. But when there's neural pathways, and we learn every day about the connection with body and mind as well, we're still really starting to learn more about that in society. So you know, the possibilities are endless with this. But yeah, it's a fascinating topic.
So for a paranormal investigator, is, you know, getting that under control, withholding your beliefs and your perceptions of reality or what's possible, is that really hard to get a handle on?
It always is. To be able to investigate, particularly, as I said, like other people's NDEs who've lived in different ways, different cultures, that it's not hard to get past them having the belief, but it's getting past making your belief stay in check. For me, I've always been somebody who, regardless of what I believe in, it stays in the box, because I'm not investigating my belief. I'm investigating other people's, but to not let it influence, and that's as much as I can, because we're all influenced by our beliefs, all influenced by what we believe, what happens on the other side. You know, I believe there's potential for something to be happening on the other side. There has to be. I think it'd be silly and ignorant to think there is not, just as much as I think it's silly and ignorant to think that we're the only people on this planet, in this universe. There is too much possibility, and that's the same as I think of the afterlife. It's like I don't know if there's an afterlife, but geez, I'm open-minded to that. But at the same time, keeping my whatever, I don't even really have religious beliefs, to be honest, and I think that probably stands me in good stead as an investigator. But at the same time, I will always make sure that what my beliefs of the afterlife are possible stay within myself, and I don't bring them into an investigation. So yeah, it's a battle. It's a battle, but it's a battle that I'm aware of, because it's confirmation bias, and it's a battle that I know of, and I'm like, okay, I know this exists. I'm going to be a human being, but I keep it in check.
Yeah, oh, that's great. Yeah, I've struggled with that over the years, and the more outrageous a person's report is of their own experience, the more I become aware I have to leave room in my mind for something new to come in. Because when you've been doing something for a few decades, you sort of get a little bit fixed in your perception, and you've got to pull that back all the time, because, you know, and as you go along, you hear a lot of experiences, so you're hearing less that's new, because you've been in it for a while. But when you hear something new, you go, okay, well, this is new. Let's pull back and let's just absorb that and see where that goes. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm hearing you.
Yeah. So Beth, your learning lounge, how do people access that, and how do they hear more about negative near-death experiences?
Well, it's on Facebook. So for those who are Facebook inclined, it's called the Access Paranormal Learning Lounge group. All you need to do is send an invite, and you'll be able to jump on. I will obviously accept that, and then obviously you'll be able to have access to all the other videos as well, all the different learning topics that I have there, and of course the one that's coming up in the next couple of weeks. So that's going to be quite fun as well. As I said, it's as we've spoken about, a very, very eclectic topic. If you want to learn more about it as well, there's other bits of studies, there's other different types of negative NDEs that I'll go into as well. There's kind of like semi-categorized too, so we'll go into that a bit more. And also it's very interactive as well. So if you've got questions at the time and even afterwards as well, because we all live around the world, particularly, you know, with me moving halfway around the world, I have more respect for that now than I ever have. You know, post a question even after the live video if you cannot be there as well. So Access Paranormal Learning Facebook group.
Terrific. And you have a website?
I do. It's called accessparanormal.com, and it's for all different types of paranormal investigating when it comes to this fabulous topic. So yes.
Oh, great. Well, thanks very much, Beth.
Thank you.